Projections are showing that Microsoft is going to be number 2 going forward in terms of game revenue. The developers for SCORN give us an update on where the game is. Digital Foundry weigh in on if we are going to get a mid-gen refresh this generation for these consoles. And Sniper Elite 5 released last week, and it has done very well, being helped out as well by Xbox Game Pass. As we know, the video game industry is changing in terms of how these companies are making a ton of their money. And with Xbox, they're transitioning over to more content and services with things like Xbox Game Pass and Xbox Cloud Gaming, as well as acquiring more and more studios so that they can continue to build out that portfolio. So when you log into Xbox, you log into Xbox Game Pass, you just have pretty much unlimited content to play. There's always going to be something to play there. And once Activision Blizzard comes over, it's going to be even more content with games like Call of Duty coming into the service. So going forward, projecting how these companies are going to continue to grow and which company is going to be bigger than the other is an interesting thing to look at. And we got these projections here from Statista Chart. And they're saying here that according to Statista Chart, Microsoft will be the second in game revenue after the Activision Blizzard acquisition based off of the 2021 figure. So they say here, Microsoft $12.9 billion in terms of gaming revenue. That's what they made in fiscal year 2021. Activision $8.1 billion, which will put them right away at $21 billion, putting it ahead of Sony, moving them down to third place, but behind Tencent at first place. And we can see here from this chart, this is from the fiscal year 2021 in terms of highest game revenues. And you can see the difference amongst all of these companies, how some are growing and some are falling. Well, specifically, the only one that actually had a year-over-year decline in terms of their gaming revenues was Sony, whereas Microsoft went up 9.6%. And I think these are very telling numbers as things I've talked about in previous videos as to where the video game industry is going. And you can see these companies, their revenues going up, Sony's revenue going down, which is telling as to which strategy is working. And the strategy that is working is the ecosystem strategy, where you put your games out and they're available to play across multiple devices. You're not being hurt by things like the chip shortage. You're not being hurt by people just not being able to access your ecosystem because they're locked to a box. And Sony has definitely recognized this, as well as we are hearing more and more that they are going to be moving more games to PC as well as mobile, trying to put more of their games, I think they said like half of their games or so, by 2025 available on PC and mobile. And then you think of the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, and one of the biggest things that came along with that acquisition was Candy Crush and King and the revenues from mobile. So the video game industry has really evolved over the last decade or so, where it completely has changed from like the Xbox 360 era until now in terms of how these companies see where the money is. And the money, from all the reports that we've seen from the fiscal years, from the investor relations briefing, is that more people are spending money on microtransactions, on services, on games as a service, and that increasing that type of content is how you're going to increase your overall gaming revenues as a company. And we see a chart like this. I mean, the proof's right in the pudding when you look at stuff like this, where the revenues are coming from, where the majority of it for Microsoft Gaming is coming from their content and their services, and the minority of it is coming from actually pushing the hardware itself. I mean, that's something that hasn't ever really changed. Even in the previous generations, before we had these ecosystems, consoles, selling them just wasn't where you were making their money. You're usually selling your consoles at a launch, at least for the first couple of years, until it becomes cheap enough to make where you can make some money off of the console itself. And you're making all the money off of these services by selling software, selling the discs or the cartridges back in the day on the consoles. And then today, you're just getting people into your system so they can spend money on the network, on the Xbox network, on the PlayStation network, where you're keeping a lot more of those revenues, and the costs of selling those services, because everything's digital now, is much lower than having to actually create the physical versions of these games. And then we move on to this article here from newzoo.com, and they talk about the different platforms and the growth amongst these different platforms. And they say here that Xbox Game Pass gives Microsoft healthy growth as the other platform holders face challenges. And I think the main thing from this little segment here is that you look at the growth year over year. You look at where Xbox has grown 9.6% year over year from where it was in 2020 to 2021. It'll be very interesting to see what happens at 2022, especially without a release yet of a first-party Xbox Game Studios game. But you look at that growth and you can see how that growth has sustained and continued to increase at a heavier rate than PlayStation, which actually lost year-over-year growth. And the reason they're able to do that is because of their services, is because of Xbox Game Pass. And if you think Sony isn't sitting there looking at this and thinking, how can they continue to have year-over-year growth with their current strategy? They know that they can't. That's why they're transitioning over to the more subscription with the PlayStation Plus new tiers and bringing games over to PC. Because at the end of the day, these are just big corporations and they need to have that year-over-year growth for their shareholders. Because when you have a negative number, people start to get concerned and people start to get scared. And it says here, a plethora of high-profile releases in 2021, including Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5, attracted even more people to Game Pass while bolstering full-priced boxed and digital revenues. After all, both titles featured live service monetization, and more than 1 million people paid extra to play Forza before it came to Game Pass. That's something we forget about, but if you remember all the people that actually paid the extra for that deluxe edition or whatever it was called to get access to Forza Horizon 5 early plus additional content, that was huge. So many people did that. And I think in 2022 that we have already seen throughout the first quarter of this year, the Xbox Series console, even without a first-party Xbox Game Studio game, has been outselling the PlayStation 5. They've prepared better from the chip shortage with things like the Xbox Series S, but even without that, people are still able to get into their ecosystem via PC or via the cloud. And I think by the end of 2022, let's say hypothetically Xbox doesn't release a first-party Xbox game into their service, and then you see Sony release something like God of War Ragnarok, I think that will be one of the biggest tests to see the difference in these revenues. If God of War Ragnarok comes out and Sony does not grow as much as Xbox does, with Xbox not releasing a first-party Xbox game, I think that will be solidifying that narrative that the console exclusive thing is not where these companies are going to rest on to grow going forward. They're going to rest on their services and their content with things like Xbox Game Pass, where they have the ecosystem exclusives that can be played across multiple different devices. So interesting stuff here, but of course there's still lots of year left. There's still so many things that can change. This deal with Activision Blizzard may close before the end of the year. Call of Duty games may be making their way onto Game Pass before the end of the year. There's still so much to be seen, and it'll be an interesting show on June 12th, which will hopefully give us a lot of insight as to what we can expect between now and 2023. All right, jumping over here to an update for a game that is coming to Xbox Game Pass on day one. I think a game a lot of people are excited for, and this is this survival horror first-person shooter style game called SCORN. So we've known that this game has been delayed, and the new release date for this game, or the new release time for this game, is October 2022. So that's going to be a big title for that month. But we haven't had any real confirmation if that is still a go and if they're still on track. Luckily, though, the developers for SCORN put out this Pulse Monthly where they confirm that everything right now is still on track. And they say, we've been asked a lot this month if we're still on track for October launch, and we are. The teams are working hard to ensure we stay on track. Here is the latest progress update from Lubomir. Over the last month, our 3D team has finalized creating all of the remaining static meshes, so production is progressing well. They aim to have everything completed in June. Animation and VFX are currently our biggest focus, and the teams are busy ironing out bugs and finalizing everything. We're full steam ahead for our release in October and excited to be able to show off more of this game soon. Thank you for taking the time to read these updates each month. We have a lot more planned to share over the coming months as we gear up for release, so keep your eyes peeled for more exciting news. Remember to follow us on our official social channels on Facebook or Twitter for additional updates and behind the scenes content. So that's exciting news because I'm very excited for this game, and I think a lot of people are very excited for this game. This was a recent video they just put out, and if you listen to the sound effects and just the overall graphics of this, it's just super creepy and looks and sounds really, really good. The guns as well look just extremely creative. So I think this is one that people are excited to play in October. They say here there's more information coming soon, so this may mean we hear more about this on June 12th, and I hope it stays on track. I hope this one does get a day one Xbox Game Pass release in October. All right, jumping over here to the talk about the mid-gen refresh for these consoles. So as we know, this picture has been circulating around the internet, and it's from TCL. They had their information session or whatever it was called. They're talking about trying to sell their higher end TVs, 8K, and then they put up on the screen here Gen 9.5, which would mean a mid-generation refresh for the Xbox Series S, X, and the PlayStation 5. As you can see here, 2023/2024 new Xbox Series S and X and PlayStation 5 Pro. And they have speculation here on the output of like 8K and the GPU that's going to be used. And people, including myself, have had a lot of opinions on this. My opinion is they potentially had information about stuff that we don't know about yet, which is doubtful, or they were just guessing. And I think they're just guessing here, kind of speculating that there could be a mid-gen refresh based off of what happened last generation, because they want to get people excited for their high-end TVs, and they want to try to sell those high-end TVs once they are coming out. And now Digital Foundry has weighed in on this, and here is what they say. I don't think we need them new consoles because there still is not a large enough install base for the currently released PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Supply constraints throughout the pandemic threw off the dissemination of these consoles so that they've had a wider base. They've been selling really well, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have a wider install base, which is what I think we need before we get into the pro console territory. And I 100% agree with that take, because you look at the supply and the demand. Yes, these consoles have sold very well, but they're still not meeting the demand out there. They could be selling a lot better if there is just more supply for them. And you would think that before jumping into a pro version of these consoles where they will be more expensive to manufacture, these companies are looking at that demand and how they can't meet them yet. And eventually going forward, it will be easier to meet that demand. The chip shortage will be going away, and they're going to be able to sell as many consoles as they want without struggling to get them out there. And the profit margin is going to be bigger because it's going to be cheaper to produce these consoles. So I don't see why they would want to jump into the pro console territory, decrease that profit margin without really having the need to stimulate the market, which is what the pro consoles essentially do. Especially if you look at last generation, they put those out because they saw there was a need to stimulate the market. There was a need that people wanted. The sales for the original PS4 and the Xbox One were slowing down, and they need to stimulate it by putting out the pro consoles to increase those sales, which I don't think is going to be an issue. Definitely not right now, and I don't think it'll be an issue in a couple of years from now. They continue on here to say, I think the PS4 Pro and the One X kind of worked for two reasons. Because one, there was the rise of 4K displays, which were becoming popular. That's not happening with 8K displays. Secondly, at least, especially from Microsoft's perspective, they knew the original Xbox One was largely underpowered and not well received. It was the first time that Xbox came out with a console that was below par in terms of capabilities. That's not okay for Xbox brand, hence Xbox One X was designed essentially solve that. And again, I agree with that take 100% as well, because you do look at the Xbox One, you look at the PS4 as well. They're both anemic consoles compared to what we got with the Series X and the PlayStation 5, and we have seen not even close to what these consoles can do, especially with a lot of the RDNA 2 technology that is going to be able to be utilized. So I'm with Digital Foundry, and I don't think we're getting a mid-gen refresh this generation, which I'm all for. I don't think we need one with the consoles like the Xbox Series X. All right, jumping over here to Sniper Elite 5 and early information on how it's doing. And we got information here on its UK boxed sales. So this isn't including any digital sales. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So Sniper Elite 5 right now is #1 in the UK in terms of the box charts. It's on top of the list. You go down here. Sniper Elite 5 was #1. Horizon Forbidden West was #2. And Nintendo Switch Sports was #3. Again, box sales of this game. And they say here that the physical sales were actually 64% lower than Sniper Elite 4, which released back in 2017. But yes, of course, back in 2017, the digital sales weren't as high as they are now. And most of these physical sales were on PlayStation, with just 8% of sales coming from the Xbox platform. And you can equate this to the fact that this game released day one on Xbox Game Pass, and I'm sure a ton of people downloaded it and played the game. And they also mentioned here that Xbox game sales tend to be more digital than physical compared with PlayStation. So overall, this is a very positive thing for Sniper Elite 5 in terms of the box sales, it being number one on top of the charts. A popular game, a lot of people have checked it out. I've been seeing a lot of people playing it, especially through Xbox Game Pass, seeing videos of it, and they're saying this is the best Sniper Elite yet. I haven't checked it out yet, but what I do find interesting here is the numbers with just 8% of the box sales on the Xbox platform. It will be very interesting to see what this means in terms of how many people bought it digitally on Xbox, how many people actually played this game via Xbox Game Pass, because I have a feeling this game did very, very well on Game Pass with probably millions of downloads and people checking it out. We don't have the digital numbers, we don't have the Xbox Game Pass numbers, but you think about a game like this, releases day one to Xbox Game Pass, they make that deal with Microsoft, they get a bunch of money, they don't have to worry about a lot of the marketing costs and the development costs, because I'm assuming with that deal, that money that they made automatically is already offsetting that. Then they put it out there, it's a popular game, they sell a bunch of copies on PlayStation, become number one in the box sale charts, and I think it's a win-win for these developers, even with only 8% of the sales in terms of the box sales on Xbox. So it'll be very interesting to see overall what the downloads are and what the digital sales are for this game, but it's great to see Sniper Elite 5 doing well, and if you've checked it out, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. That's it for me, guys. Let me know your thoughts on all of this stuff. Are you excited to play Scorn? Do you think it's going to release in October? What do you think about Xbox moving up to number 2 in terms of gaming revenue? What are your thoughts on the mid-gen refresh of consoles? And again, have you played Sniper Elite 5? What are your thoughts of the game? If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you're new here, you liked what you saw, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.